Welcome to Whispers of History, where the past gently unfolds, inviting you into its quiet, poetic embrace. Tonight, we'll journey through a time where nature and belief danced hand in hand, a place where gardeners spoke to the vines. You'll probably fall asleep before the day ends, but if you're still with us, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm curious to know how far this story travels. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. As you step into the cool evening air of ancient Persia, a faint breeze rustles the leaves of towering cypress trees. The scent of roses mingles with the earthy smell of freshly watered soil. And in the distance, the sound of water trickling from fountains fills the air, a delicate, calming melody. These were the gardens of paradise. You walk along a path lined with lush greenery, and the world around you feels somehow different. Perhaps it's the geometry of the space, the balance of water, light, and shadow. Or maybe it's the idea that in this garden everything, plants, stones, even the air, has a voice. You pause for a moment, half expecting to hear the vines speak. They say the gardeners once believed that vines had a language of their own, one that could be heard only by those with a deep connection to nature. Now I know what you're thinking. This is where the story starts to get a little strange, but hold on, because the Persian gardens were more than just a place of beauty. They were a symbol of harmony, an ideal that blended the earthly with the divine. In the gardens, vines weren't just plants. They were alive, sacred, and in the eyes of the Persian gardeners, full of wisdom. The belief wasn't just rooted in poetic metaphor. These gardens, known as the very word that inspired the term paradise, were carefully cultivated to mirror the cosmos. The gardeners, often men of great learning and spiritual insight, would plant their vines and then in quiet reverence speak to them. It was said that the vines would respond in their own way, curling towards the gardener's voice, growing stronger with the words they heard. Historians still debate whether these talking vines were truly believed to have a language, or if they were simply a poetic representation of the intimate bond between the gardener and nature. But what's undeniable is the sense of deep spiritual connection these gardens fostered. A sense that nature wasn't something to be conquered, but something to be listened to. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were a symbol of the divine. They were designed with precise mathematical proportions to create a sacred space, a miniature cosmos on Earth. And here's the quirky tidbit. There's evidence that some Persian gardeners actually spoke to their vines using poems, hoping that the rhythm and flow would help the plants grow better. Whether it worked or not, I can't say. But it certainly added a unique flavor to their gardening philosophy. Now let's ease back into the history a bit more. Imagine you're in the garden, the soft murmur of water beside you, and you hear the distant sound of someone whispering to a vine, coaxing it to grow. It's a delicate, almost hypnotic moment. You wonder, could the vines really understand? Could they speak back in their own way? The sun has dipped below the horizon now, casting a soft twilight across the garden. The air is cool, the night settling in like a heavy blanket. But there's still life in the garden even at this hour. The flowers have closed their petals, the vines winding up their trellises in graceful arcs. You can almost feel them breathing, reaching, growing. And this was the true magic of the Persian garden, a living, breathing work of art. But let's dive a little deeper into the role of the gardener. These individuals weren't just horticulturists. They were spiritual guides, protectors of the sacred knowledge that had been passed down through generations. To them, the garden was a place of divine interaction. Their belief wasn't just that the vines listened, but that the act of tending to them was a form of prayer. Now picture a gardener in the quiet of the night, gently tending to the vines, whispering softly to them as if imparting a prayer. The garden is peaceful, with only the sound of leaves stirring in the wind and the occasional rustle of an animal making its way through the foliage. The gardener's hands move deftly, but with a tenderness that shows how deeply they care for each vine. They are not just plants to be cultivated. They are vessels of wisdom, every leaf a living word from the past, every tendril an expression of divine order. Some major historical fact. The Persian gardens were not just designed for beauty, they were a reflection of the world beyond, created in accordance with the idea of or the four-part garden. This symmetrical design was meant to represent the four corners of the earth, as well as the four elements: water, earth, air, and fire. But let's pause for a second and dive into something that doesn't often make it into history books. Persian gardeners believed that the act of speaking to their plants helped them grow stronger and healthier. A bit like talking to your houseplants in the modern world, only these ancient gardeners took it to a spiritual level. Historians, of course, have their doubts about how much of this was literal. Some think it was simply a way of expressing the deep connection between the gardener and the garden, while others believe there might have been something more mystical at play. Maybe the vines didn't talk, but the act of speaking to them gave the gardeners a sense of purpose, a sense of connection to something much larger than themselves. Now, as you walk through this tranquil garden, the breeze ruffling your hair, you can almost hear the faintest whispers in the leaves. Was it just the wind? Or did the vines really have a voice, soft and hidden beneath the rustle of the trees? As historians still debate whether ancient Persian gardeners truly believed in talking vines, or if it was just a poetic metaphor for the deep connection between nature and the human spirit. But one thing is for sure: these gardens were sacred places, where the mundane and the divine merged, creating a harmony that was reflected in every leaf, every vine, and every drop of water. The moon is now high in the sky, casting soft, silver light onto the garden's meticulously arranged paths. You can see the way the shadows play against the perfectly symmetrical layout, the precise positioning of trees, flowers, and water, everything in its right place. The Persian garden, more than a mere pleasure ground, was a reflection of the cosmos. Its design was deliberate, a sacred geometry that mirrored the divine order of the universe. As you walk along the stone pathways, you can't help but notice the perfect symmetry. Everything here is balanced. The water flows in neat channels, dividing the space into 4 distinct sections. Each section represents a corner of the earth: north, south, east, and west, and also the 4 elements that ancient Persians believed governed the world: water, earth, air, and fire. You pause at a fountain. the water rippling gently in the moonlight, and reflect on how something so simple can be a direct link between the human and the divine. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were designed according to the four-part garden layout, symbolizing the division of the universe into four parts. The careful use of water, both as a visual and practical element, was integral to these gardens, with canals and fountains channeling the element of water through the space. In many ways, these gardens were designed as a microcosm of paradise. The idea was simple yet profound. By recreating paradise on earth, the gardeners brought the divine closer to the people. It was said that these gardens were not just for relaxation, they were a place of meditation, a place where the soul could connect with the higher realms. The act of walking through these gardens was meant to be a spiritual experience, a quiet journey toward enlightenment. But then you begin to wonder, how did this belief in divine geometry translate into everyday life? How did the common gardener who spent their days tending to the vines and watering the plants see their work as a reflection of the heavens? Perhaps it wasn't just about creating a beautiful space. It was about connecting with something larger, something eternal. Historians still debate whether these gardens were truly viewed as a direct link to the divine, or if they were simply a beautiful escape from the rigors of daily life. But what's clear is that these gardens were more than just green spaces. They were sacred spaces, designed with a higher purpose in mind. Now, as you continue your walk, you notice a gardener working quietly under the moonlight. His hands move with reverence as he tends to a patch of vines, his voice a soft murmur as he speaks to the plants. You realize this isn't just work, it's a ritual, a dialogue between the gardener and the garden, a conversation that transcends time and space. It's as though the garden itself is alive, and in some way the gardener is both caretaker and participant in a divine act. As a quirky tidbit, some believe that Persian gardeners in their quiet moments would hum tunes to the vines, believing that music, especially harmonious, melodious sounds, could encourage the plants to grow stronger and more vibrant. While it might sound a bit far-fetched, it's a reminder that in ancient Persia, even the simplest acts were imbued with deep meaning. You breathe in the cool night air, feeling the serenity of the garden settle over you. The whispers of the vines seem more pronounced now, their tendrils twisting ever so slightly as if in response to the night's stillness. You almost want to speak to them yourself just to see what happens. But perhaps the real secret is simply in the silence, the quiet connection between human, plant, and the divine. The garden has quieted further as you wander deeper, the sounds of the outside world fading away. You hear only the rustling of the leaves, the distant murmur of the fountains, and the soft, rhythmic sound of your own footsteps on the path. The air is cool now, the warmth of the day replaced by the calm of night. This is a moment of stillness, a moment where time seems to stretch, offering you a rare opportunity to listen, to really listen. The Persian gardeners understood the power of silence. It wasn't just about tending to the vines or arranging the flowers. It was about creating space for the garden to speak, for the earth to share its secrets. In many ways, their work was less about control and more about collaboration. They didn't force the plants to grow, they worked in harmony with them, listening to the subtle shifts in the soil, the gentle pull of the seasons. You stop in front of a particularly large vine, its leaves dark and glossy in the moonlight. You can't help but reach out and touch it, feeling the coolness of the leaves beneath your fingertips. It's almost as if the vine is welcoming you, acknowledging your presence. The gardeners, too, believed that plants could sense their emotions and intentions, that a kind touch could help the plants flourish, while a harsh word or a quick movement could make them wither. Historians still debate whether the Persians genuinely believed plants could feel and respond to human interaction, or if the belief was more symbolic, reflecting their understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. But what's undeniable is that their relationship with nature was one of respect, not dominance. As a major historical fact, the concept of greenery as sacred and calming can be traced back to the Persian gardens, where every plant, tree, and vine had its place within a larger, divinely inspired design. These gardens were more than just decorative, they were a means of spiritual alignment, helping individuals find balance and harmony within themselves and with the natural world. As you continue your walk, you begin to realize that the true magic of the Persian garden isn't in the plants themselves, but in the way they were perceived. It wasn't just about beauty or function. It was about fostering a deeper understanding of life, death, and everything in between. The gardeners weren't just tending to plants, they were tending to the soul, both their own and the souls of those who visited. You stop for a moment, taking it all in. The silence, the stillness, the connection, it's hard to describe, but there's a certain peace here, a peace that comes from understanding that everything is interconnected. You wonder, could you live your life this way, in such harmony with the world around you? Or would it be impossible, this constant dance between control and surrender? As a quirky tidbit, it's said that the ancient Persians believed that each plant in their garden had its own spirit, and that if you treated the plant with respect, you could commune with that spirit. Some even believed that the plants held the key to divine knowledge, and that speaking to them could reveal secrets of the universe. Whether or not that was true, it certainly adds a layer of intrigue to the idea of a garden as a living, breathing entity. As the night stretches on, you find yourself sinking deeper into the tranquil beauty of the garden. The air is cooler now, the garden even more still. You've been walking for what feels like hours, but you feel no rush, no need to leave. You're content here in this peaceful, timeless space, surrounded by the soft whispers of nature. As the evening deepens, a mist begins to settle over the garden. It's a soft, almost imperceptible fog that gently wraps around the vines and trees, adding a mystical layer to the already otherworldly atmosphere. You feel the moisture in the air, the coolness against your skin, as if the garden itself is exhaling. It's here, in this enchanted space, that the ancient gardeners believed the vines held not just the whispers of the earth, but the memories of the past. Every vine, every plant was a living testament to the history of the garden. The longer they grew, the more they remembered. The gardeners often spoke of how the vines seemed to absorb the stories of those who had tended them, and how, with each passing season, they grew wiser. You stop beside a thick, winding vine, its tendrils twisted and gnarled like the fingers of an old man. The gardeners would tell you that this vine had been planted by someone long ago, perhaps generations before. It had witnessed the passing of seasons, the rise and fall of dynasties, the laughter and tears of those who had walked these very paths. A major historical fact. The Persian gardens, especially those built in the ancient city of Persepolis, were not only decorative spaces but symbolic places of power. They were used by kings and emperors as a backdrop for important political and religious ceremonies, and the trees and vines were seen as witnesses to history. But what about the vine in front of you? Could it really hold memories, or was it simply a product of poetic thinking? Some historians argue that the belief in plants as vessels of memory was a metaphor for how the garden connected past and present. Still, the gardeners themselves swore that the plants could remember. The knowledge, the wisdom of the past lived on in the garden. As a quirky tidbit, the belief in plants as memory keepers wasn't unique to Persia. In other parts of the world, similar ideas have emerged. Ancient cultures, from the Celts to the Egyptians, believed that trees and plants were spiritual entities, carrying the wisdom of their ancestors. You gaze at the vine, wondering if it really does carry the weight of history, if it truly holds the memories of those who came before. You wonder if perhaps you're standing in the presence of something older than you can even comprehend, something that has outlasted the lives of kings and conquerors. It's a humbling thought, one that makes you pause for just a moment longer. Now, as the fog thickens and the night grows darker, you hear a faint sound. It's like a whisper, soft and almost imperceptible. Is it the wind, or is it the vine speaking its ancient truths to the night? You feel a strange connection to the garden, as though the earth itself is reaching out to you, inviting you to listen to its secrets. Historians still debate whether the Persian gardeners truly believed that the vines held memories. Some suggest it was simply a poetic way of explaining the garden's significance, while others argue that the connection between nature and human consciousness was far more profound. But whatever the truth, the belief in memory-laden plants is a reminder of the deep reverence ancient cultures held for nature. The garden has grown quieter now. The mist is thick enough to obscure the distant mountains, leaving only the garden in focus, a world unto itself. You stand near a small fountain, the water rippling softly as it falls into the basin below. The sound is soothing, calming, as though the water itself is trying to tell you something. You've probably heard it 1,000 times before, the sound of water in gardens, rivers, or streams, but here it feels different. Here it feels like more than just a sound. Water in Persian gardens wasn't just for aesthetic purposes. It was symbolic. It was the lifeblood of the garden, a conduit between the earth and the heavens. The ancient gardeners believed that the sound of water flowing through the channels carried the prayers of the people, and that these prayers would ascend with the water, carried up to the divine. As you stand by the fountain, you wonder, could it be that the sound of water was, in fact, a form of prayer? It's easy to see how the ancient gardeners could have believed this. Water, after all, is essential for life. It nourishes, it refreshes, it cleanses. And in the gardens of Persia, it did all of these things and more. It was not just a resource, it was a sacred element, an element that connected the human to the divine. As a major historical fact, the Persians were masters of water management. The Qanat system, a sophisticated method of underground irrigation, was developed in ancient Persia and is still in use today. This system allowed water to be brought from distant sources to the gardens, ensuring that the plants and the people could thrive. But the gardeners didn't just use water for practical purposes, they believed it had spiritual significance. The fountains, the flowing streams, the reflective pools, these weren't just decorative features. They were symbols of life, of connection, and of the divine. The gardens were alive with the sound of water, and the sound was a reminder of the divine presence in everyday life. As a quirky tidbit, in some Persian gardens, the sound of water was amplified by the strategic placement of small pebbles in the bottom of fountains. The idea was that the water's gentle tinkling, amplified by the stones, would create a more profound spiritual effect. You listen closely, the sound of the water filling the air, its rhythm somehow soothing your thoughts, calming your mind. You realize with a gentle sigh that the water in these gardens was more than just water, it was an experience. It wasn't simply a resource, it was an expression of something deeper. The gardeners didn't just cultivate the earth, they cultivated the spirit, the soul, the connection between nature and divinity. The day is now fully awake. The warmth of the sun filters through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the garden paths. The air smells rich with the perfume of blooming flowers, the hum of life buzzing quietly around you. This is a garden in its full glory, alive, vibrant, and glowing in the light of the afternoon. But the garden is more than just a place of beauty. It is a testament to the hands that have shaped it, the gardeners who have tended to it through the centuries. These gardeners were not just people who worked the earth, they were keepers of a sacred tradition, carrying the knowledge of the land and the cosmos from generation to generation. They were the eternal gardeners, passing their wisdom down through the ages like a living thread. You pause by a row of meticulously pruned cypress trees, their dark, slender trunks reaching high into the sky. These trees have stood here for centuries, growing tall and strong just as the wisdom of the gardeners has endured. The gardeners, with their patient hands and sharp eyes, would have cared for these trees with the utmost reverence. Their work was not just about growing plants, it was about nurturing life, understanding the delicate balance between the earth and the sky. As a major historical fact, Persian gardening traditions were passed down through the generations, often within families. This knowledge, passed on from father to son, became a sacred responsibility, an art form that was deeply intertwined with religious beliefs and cultural identity. The garden was not just a place to work, it was a space for spiritual practice, where the act of tending to the earth was a form of worship. These gardeners, with their deep understanding of the cycles of nature, were the stewards of an ancient tradition. Their connection to the land was not one of exploitation but of reverence. They worked with the earth, not against it. They listened to the rhythms of the garden and learned to read its subtle signs: when to plant, when to water, when to wait. The garden, like life itself, was a dance of patience and understanding. Historians still debate how much of the gardener's work was tied to spiritual beliefs and how much was simply practical knowledge. But what's undeniable is that these gardeners held a deep respect for the earth, a respect that transcended the physical act of gardening. They believed that their work was a reflection of the divine order, a way to connect with something larger than themselves. As a quirky tidbit, it is said that some Persian gardeners would leave small offerings in the garden, often flowers, fruit, or even coins, as a way of thanking the garden for its bounty. These offerings were not just for good luck, they were a sign of respect for the land, a gesture of gratitude for the life the garden gave them. As you walk through the garden, you feel a quiet sense of reverence for the gardeners who tended this place before you. You wonder how many of them stood where you are now, breathing in the same air, listening to the same whispers in the vines. The garden has stood for centuries, but it is the hands of the gardeners that have made it what it is today. Without them, the beauty you see around you would not exist. You realize that these gardeners, though long gone, live on in the garden itself. Their wisdom, their care, their understanding of nature all remain woven into the very fabric of the earth. The garden is not just a place of beauty, it is a living memorial to those who tended it, who gave it life and meaning. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting a golden glow across the garden, you come to a quiet corner where the scent of jasmine fills the air. It's a secluded spot, shaded by a thick canopy of vines, and for a moment it feels as if the world has stopped. There is no sound here, only the soft whisper of the leaves in the breeze and the distant hum of life beyond the garden walls. This is where the philosopher might come to reflect, to meditate, and to seek the deeper truths of the universe. The Persian gardens were not only a space for physical beauty, they were also a place for intellectual and spiritual exploration. Here, the great minds of Persia would have come to sit, to think, to question, and to seek answers to the mysteries of life. You sit on a stone bench beneath the vines, taking in the peaceful stillness around you. The ancient gardeners, too, understood that the garden was a place for contemplation. They didn't just cultivate plants, they cultivated minds. The act of working in the garden, of tending to the plants, was a form of meditation. It allowed the gardener to connect with nature, to align themselves with the rhythms of the earth, and to reflect on the larger questions of existence. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often associated with intellectual and spiritual pursuits. In many ways, the garden was a symbol of the philosopher's journey toward understanding. The garden's design, with its symmetry, its balance, and its careful consideration of space, was a physical manifestation of the harmony and order the philosopher sought in the world. In this tranquil corner of the garden, you begin to realize that the Persian garden is more than just a space of beauty. It is a metaphor for life itself. The careful arrangement of the plants, the movement of the water, the shifting of the light, all of these elements reflect the ebb and flow of existence. The garden, like life, is ever-changing, never static. It is a place where the past, present, and future converge, where every moment is a reminder of the transience of time. And historians still debate whether the garden was truly a place of intellectual contemplation, or if it was simply a space for leisure and relaxation. But the more you sit here, the more you realize that the garden is both. It is a place of beauty, yes, but it is also a place where one can reflect on the nature of existence, the mysteries of life, and the meaning of the universe. As a quirky tidbit, the idea of gardens as spaces for philosophical reflection was not unique to Persia. In many ancient cultures, gardens were seen as places of intellectual and spiritual growth. In ancient Greece, for example, philosophers like Epicurus would retreat to gardens to contemplate the nature of happiness and the good life. As you sit in the garden, the soft light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the stone pathways, you can almost feel the presence of those who came before you, the great thinkers, the gardeners, the poets. You wonder what they might have thought as they walked these paths, sat in these quiet corners, and reflected on the mysteries of life. Their thoughts, their ideas, their questions still linger here, woven into the very fabric of the garden. As the evening settles into a gentle twilight, you find yourself drawn to the distant edges of the garden, where the last light of day flickers through the branches of ancient trees. The atmosphere is heavy with the weight of the day's warmth, but there's a subtle shift, a cooling of the air, a deepening of the shadows. You breathe it in, feeling the quiet embrace of the garden wrapping around you, and you realize that this place is more than just a space for beauty or reflection. It is a living, breathing organism, continually shifting, evolving, and adapting to the seasons, to the cycles of life and death. The Persian gardeners knew this better than anyone. They understood that their work was part of a larger cycle, one that transcended individual lives and stretched back into the far reaches of history. The act of tending to the garden was not a one-time event, but part of an eternal, ongoing process of creation, destruction, and rebirth. In every seed planted, in every vine that was carefully trained to grow in a particular direction, the gardener was participating in this eternal dance of life. You pause in front of a grove of pomegranate trees, their branches heavy with fruit. The pomegranate, with its vivid red seeds hidden beneath the tough skin, was symbolic in ancient Persia of life's mysteries, its hidden treasures, its beauty, and its hardship. The gardener knew that this fruit would not ripen overnight. It would take time, months of careful tending, of watching the tree grow, of understanding its needs, and waiting for the perfect moment to harvest. As a major historical fact, the pomegranate was a sacred symbol in ancient Persia, often associated with fertility, life, and immortality. It was a plant that represented the continuity of life, the idea that each generation carried the wisdom of the one before. It was said that the pomegranate tree itself symbolized the unbroken cycle of nature, with each seed inside representing a new life, a new beginning. But the garden was not just about waiting for things to grow. It was also about knowing when to let go, when to allow the old to wither and die so that something new could take its place. The gardener had to learn this delicate balance, to nurture life, yes, but also to accept the inevitability of death. In the garden, death was not an end, but part of the process, a necessary step in the ongoing cycle of growth. Historians still debate whether ancient Persian gardens were viewed as literal representations of the cycle of life and death, or if they were simply metaphorical. Some argue that the gardens were a physical manifestation of the Persian belief in the eternal nature of the soul, while others suggest that the gardens were more about creating a space for peace and reflection, a place where one could temporarily escape the harshness of life's realities. As a quirky tidbit, the act of planting a pomegranate tree in Persian culture was often seen as a gesture of hope and renewal. In fact, it was common for people to plant pomegranate trees to mark significant life events, births, marriages, or even the passing of a loved one. The belief was that the tree, with its promise of new life, would bring balance and healing to those who tended it. As you stand by the pomegranate tree, watching the sun sink lower in the sky, you realize that this garden, with all its beauty and peace, is not a static thing. It is a place in constant motion, constantly changing like the world itself. The gardeners knew this, and in their work they embraced the cyclical nature of life. They didn't fight the changes, they flowed with them just as the garden did. The sun has long since dipped beneath the horizon, leaving the garden bathed in the soft, cool glow of the moon. The air has grown still, the sounds of the day replaced by the quiet rustling of leaves and the occasional flutter of wings. You walk slowly through the garden, your footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath you. There is a sense of peace here, a calm that seeps into your bones, inviting you to pause and reflect. As you pass through an archway draped in vines, you notice a small stone bench beneath a fig tree. The fig tree, with its broad leaves and twisted branches, seems ancient, its roots deeply embedded in the earth, its fruit ripening in the quiet of the night. This, too, was a tree of significance in ancient Persia. It represented wisdom, knowledge, and the pursuit of understanding. It is here, under the fig tree, that you pause. You've heard that the Persian philosophers often retreated to the gardens to contemplate life, to meditate on the mysteries of the universe. The garden, with its harmony and balance, was the perfect environment for such reflection. It provided a space where the mind could roam free, unburdened by the distractions of the outside world. You sit on the stone bench, feeling the coolness of the stone beneath you, and you begin to think about the nature of wisdom. The Persian gardeners, much like the philosophers, sought to understand the world around them, not just as it appeared, but in its deeper, more spiritual form. They didn't view the garden as a mere collection of plants and trees. They saw it as a living, breathing entity, a reflection of the divine order. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were closely associated with the idea of spiritual enlightenment. Many scholars, poets, and philosophers of ancient Persia would retreat to these gardens to seek answers to life's big questions. The gardens were seen as sacred spaces, where one could connect with nature and the divine, and where the mind could reach new levels of understanding. But the garden was not just a physical space. It was also a mental and spiritual one. The ancient gardeners, like the philosophers, believed that in order to understand the world, one had to understand the delicate balance between nature, humanity, and the divine. It was in the garden, among the flowers and vines, that this understanding could be found. Historians still debate whether the garden was truly a space for philosophical reflection, or if it was simply a place of leisure. Some argue that the Persian gardens were more about connecting with nature and finding peace, while others believe that the garden was a space for intellectual and spiritual growth. As a quirky tidbit, in ancient Persia, it was believed that the act of planting a tree or caring for a garden was an expression of one's commitment to understanding the universe. Some philosophers even wrote about how the act of working in the garden could help one gain clarity of thought, as the quiet, meditative work allowed for deeper insight into life's mysteries. As you sit beneath the fig tree, you begin to understand. The garden, with all its beauty and complexity, is more than just a place to visit. It is a place to learn, to grow, and to reflect. The Persian gardeners, with their deep reverence for nature, understood that the garden was a microcosm of the world, a world where the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual were all intertwined. As the coolness of the night settles deeper and the garden now takes on a different character. The shadows stretch longer and the air smells even richer with the fragrance of night-blooming jasmine. You stand at the edge of a serene reflecting pool, watching the gentle ripples created by the wind's touch on the surface. As you gaze into the water, you see the stars above mirrored below, an endless, beautiful dance of light and dark, still and moving. This duality between the stillness of the water and the ever-changing movements of the wind seems to reflect the timeless nature of the Persian garden itself. It is a place caught between the eternal and the fleeting. The gardeners, with their deep knowledge of nature and the cycles of life, understood this delicate balance. They saw the garden not just as a place of beauty, but as a space where time itself was marked by the growth and decay of plants. In the garden, everything is in motion, whether you see it or not. The vines are reaching, stretching toward the sun, the flowers are blooming and withering in a never-ending cycle, the leaves fall only to grow back in the spring. The passing of time is as inevitable as the movement of water, and in the Persian garden it was something to be embraced, not resisted. The garden was a space where time slowed down and yet was also constantly being marked by the smallest changes in the landscape. As a major historical fact, the ancient Persians had a very different concept of time than we do today. For them, time was cyclical, not linear. The seasons, the cycles of life, and the movement of the heavens were all interconnected. This understanding of time as a constant flow rather than a straight line was reflected in their gardens. The gardens were not just places of aesthetic pleasure, they were a manifestation of the natural cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The idea of time as a cyclical, eternal dance was embedded in the Persian way of life. The gardeners understood that their work was part of a larger pattern, one that would continue long after they were gone. The vines that they planted, the trees that they pruned, the flowers that they nurtured, these were not just for the present moment. They were part of a tradition, part of a cycle that would carry on through the ages. The garden, in its perfect symmetry and carefully planned design, was a reflection of this belief in the eternal flow of time. Historians still debate the exact nature of the Persian understanding of time. Some scholars believe that the cyclical view of time was a core element of Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion in ancient Persia, while others argue that it was more a reflection of the deep respect for nature and the natural world. Regardless of the origins, The belief in cyclical time permeated every aspect of Persian life, from religion to gardening. As a quirky tidbit, the ancient Persians believed that the stars themselves were connected to the cycles of the garden. Some even constructed their gardens with a particular alignment to the stars, believing that the cosmic rhythms influenced the growth of plants and the health of the garden. In a way, the garden was a microcosm of the universe, where the earth below was connected to the stars above. As you stand by the reflecting pool, you feel a sense of awe at the timelessness of it all. The water ripples gently, but the stars remain steady above. The dance of time continues and the garden moves with it. The plants grow, the seasons change, and yet there is a quiet stillness in the garden, a peace that transcends time itself. This garden, with its beauty and its cycles, is a reminder that, in the grand scheme of things, we are all part of something much larger than ourselves. As the night deepens and the garden grows quieter still, the wind has died down and the sounds of the day have faded into memory. You find yourself in a secluded part of the garden, surrounded by the quiet hum of the night. There is no rush here, no noise, no distractions, just the soft rustle of the leaves in the trees and the gentle sounds of nature. This part of the garden is known for its silence. It is where the gardeners would retreat to meditate, to find peace, and to connect with the divine. The silence of the garden was not emptiness, but a kind of fullness, a space where one could listen to the inner rhythms of the world, where the stillness itself became a form of communication. In this silence, the gardener could hear the quiet whispers of the vines, the subtle movements of the plants, and the ever-present pulse of life itself. As you sit on a stone bench beneath a tall fig tree, you feel the silence envelop you. It is not oppressive, but rather a peaceful, calming presence. The garden, in all its beauty, is also a space of inner reflection. Here, the external world fades away, and the only thing that matters is the quiet connection between you and nature. The Persian gardeners understood this. They knew that silence was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. In the silence of the garden, they could hear the secrets of the earth and the divine. As a major historical fact, the Persian gardens were designed with silence in mind. The placement of trees, the arrangement of water features, and the careful cultivation of plants were all intended to create an environment that was conducive to quiet contemplation. These gardens were not just places for physical beauty. They were spaces for spiritual reflection, where the gardener could find peace and connect with the divine. Historians still debate the role of silence in ancient Persian gardens. Some believe that the gardens were specifically designed to foster moments of quiet contemplation, while others argue that the silence was a natural result of the careful design and arrangement of the space. Regardless, the idea of silence in the garden was central to the experience of the Persian gardeners. They saw it as a way to connect more deeply with nature and with the divine. As a quirky tidbit, in some Persian gardens, the gardeners would place small stone statues or fountains in corners of the garden, not as ornamental features, but as symbols of the stillness and peace they sought. These statues, often of animals or mythical creatures, were meant to serve as reminders of the garden's quiet power, a power that could only be felt in the stillness of the night. You close your eyes for a moment, taking in the silence around you. The garden is a place of peace, of reflection, of connection. The quiet is not an absence, it is a presence, a deep spiritual force that ties the garden, the gardener, and the divine together. In this silence, you can almost hear the whispers of the past, the voices of the gardeners who came before you, the ones who understood the true meaning of the garden. They knew that in silence, the universe speaks. As you sit in the stillness of the garden, the night deepening around you, you feel a sense of awe wash over you. The garden is not just a collection of plants and trees. It is a living entity filled with wisdom and knowledge. The ancient Persian gardeners knew this. They understood that the earth in all its complexity held the secrets of the universe. And they saw their work in the garden as a way to unlock those secrets, to listen to the earth and the plants, and to understand the deeper truths of life. The garden, with its perfect balance of plants, trees, and water, was a mirror of the world itself. It reflected the harmony of the universe, the delicate interplay between the natural world and the divine. The gardeners saw their work as a way to participate in this cosmic dance, to align themselves with the rhythms of the earth and the heavens. And in doing so, they believed that they could tap into a deeper wisdom, one that transcended the physical world. As a major historical fact, Persian gardening was deeply intertwined with Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion of ancient Persia. Zoroastrians believed that the earth was a sacred place, and that the act of cultivating the land was a way to honor the divine. The gardens, with their careful design and balance, were seen as a reflection of the divine order of the universe. Historians still debate the extent to which religion influenced Persian gardening practices. Some argue that the gardens were primarily a reflection of spiritual beliefs, while others suggest that they were more practical spaces designed to meet the needs of the people. But one thing is clear: the gardens were not just for decoration. They were places of deep spiritual meaning, where the act of tending to the land was seen as a form of worship. As a quirky tidbit, some Persian gardeners believed that the earth itself could communicate with them, providing them with guidance and wisdom. It is said that the gardeners would listen carefully to the sounds of the land, whether the rustle of the leaves, the flow of the water, or the movement of the wind, and interpret these sounds as messages from the divine. In this way, the garden was not just a space to work in. It was a space to listen, to receive wisdom, and to connect with something greater than oneself. You take a deep breath, feeling the wisdom of the earth settle into your bones. The garden is not just a place of beauty, it is a place of learning, of growth, of connection. It is a living testament to the knowledge that has been passed down through the ages, a place where the ancient wisdom of the earth continues to speak, if only we are willing to listen. As the moonlight deepens and the garden grows more serene, you feel an overwhelming sense of peace. The night has settled completely, and the stillness of the air is only interrupted by the soft murmur of the water, the whispers of the leaves, and the occasional rustle of an unseen creature moving through the underbrush. The garden is quiet now, yet alive. You walk slowly through it, feeling as though you're walking not just through a physical space but through time itself. The Persian garden, with its perfect design, its careful balance of nature, was a place not just of beauty but of legacy. It was a space where the past, present, and future coexisted, where every stone, every tree, every vine carried the imprint of the gardeners who had come before. The legacy of the Persian garden wasn't just in the plants themselves. It was in the care, the respect, and the understanding that the gardeners had for their craft. The garden was their gift to the future, an offering that would continue to flourish long after they were gone. As you pause near a small grove of apple trees, their fruits still hanging low from the branches, you think about the way the garden is a living monument. It is a record of the lives that have touched it, the hands that have worked it, the wisdom that has been passed down through the ages. The garden is not just a place of beauty, it is a place of memory. The trees, the vines, the flowers, they hold the stories of the past. They carry the wisdom of the generations that have come before. And in this way, the garden itself becomes an eternal witness to the cycles of life. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often seen as symbols of immortality. The careful design of the gardens, with their enclosed walls and balanced layout, represented the eternal nature of the divine. The gardens were designed not just to reflect the natural world, but to create a space that transcended the human experience, where the boundaries between the earthly and the divine became blurred. Historians still debate whether the gardens were truly seen as places of immortality, or whether this idea was simply an idealized vision. Some argue that the gardens were a reflection of the belief in the eternal nature of the soul, while others suggest that they were meant to represent an idealized vision of life on earth, one that transcended the hardships of the material world. As a quirky tidbit, the ancient Persians often planted apple trees in their gardens because they believed the fruit symbolized wisdom and knowledge. It is said that the apple tree was a favorite of the great Persian poet, who often spoke of the tree as a symbol of divine inspiration. Perhaps in their own way, the gardeners believed that each apple tree carried the wisdom of the universe within its branches, offering nourishment to both body and soul. As you stand beneath the apple trees, you can almost hear the whispers of the past. You can feel the weight of the knowledge that has been passed down through these gardens, the wisdom of the gardeners who came before. And you realize that the garden is not just a physical space. It is a living memory, a place where the legacy of the past continues to grow and thrive. As the night continues to deepen, and you find yourself in a quiet corner of the garden, where the only light is the soft glow of the moon and the shimmering reflection of the stars on the surface of the water. The garden is still now, but in its stillness there is a sense of motion, an ebb and flow that is both subtle and profound. The water moves gently in the channels, the leaves sway softly in the breeze, and the vines reach upward, stretching toward the sky. In this corner of the garden, you feel a deep sense of reflection. It's as if the garden, with all its beauty and peace, has become a mirror for your own thoughts. The stillness here is not just a physical quiet, it is a spiritual one. It invites you to pause, to breathe, and to consider the larger questions of life. Just as the Persian gardeners sought answers in the garden, so too does the garden invite you to seek your own answers. The act of tending to the garden, the gardeners believed, was an act of reflection. It was not just about growing plants, It was about cultivating a deeper understanding of the world and one's place within it. Every action in the garden, whether planting a tree, pruning a vine, or watering the flowers, was an opportunity to reflect on the larger rhythms of life. The garden was a space where the gardener could connect with nature, with the divine, and with themselves. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were considered sacred spaces for contemplation and reflection. Many religious and intellectual figures of the time would retreat to the gardens to reflect on spiritual matters, to meditate on the mysteries of existence, and to seek guidance from the divine. The gardens were designed to foster a sense of peace and clarity, where the gardener could find answers to life's big questions. Historians still debate whether the gardens were primarily designed for spiritual reflection, or whether they were more practical spaces for leisure and relaxation. Some suggest that the gardens were an idealized space, meant to reflect a utopian vision of life, while others argue that they were primarily intended as spaces for intellectual and spiritual growth. As a quirky tidbit, in ancient Persia, it was believed that the garden itself could offer wisdom. The act of working in the garden, the gardeners believed, helped them connect with the divine and tap into a deeper understanding of the world. Some even believed that certain plants, like the lotus, had special properties that could offer spiritual enlightenment. As you sit by the reflecting pool, you begin to realize that the garden, in all its complexity, is not just a place of beauty. It is a space for reflection, for understanding, and for growth. The garden is a mirror for your own thoughts, a space where you can pause and consider the larger questions of life. The quiet beauty of the garden invites you to slow down, to breathe, and to listen to the whispers of the earth. As the first light of dawn breaks through the trees, casting a warm glow on the garden. The colors of the flowers are more vibrant now. The water in the fountains sparkles as the sun rises higher in the sky. The night's coolness has given way to the warmth of the new day, and the garden is alive with energy once more. As you walk through the garden, you notice the subtle shifts in the landscape. The flowers that bloomed in the coolness of the night have closed their petals, while others are beginning to open, reaching toward the sun. The garden, it seems, is in a constant state of change, each moment bringing something new. And yet there is a sense of continuity, of things returning again just as they have for generations. The Persian gardeners understood this delicate balance between change and continuity. They understood that the garden was a space where the cycles of life were reflected in the changing of the seasons. In the spring, the garden would bloom with new life, while in the fall, the leaves would fall, making way for new growth. The gardeners embraced this natural cycle, knowing that every season brought its own beauty and wisdom. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were designed to reflect the cycles of nature. The layout of the garden, with its flowing water, symmetrical pathways, and carefully placed plants, was intended to mirror the natural world. The changing of the seasons was a reminder that life itself is cyclical, full of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. Historians still debate the extent to which the Persian gardeners viewed the seasons as a reflection of divine cycles. Some argue that the garden was a metaphor for the human experience. while others believe it was a spiritual space where the cycles of nature were seen as a direct reflection of the divine order. As a quirky tidbit, the ancient Persians believed that the changing of the seasons was a form of divine communication. Some gardeners would use the arrival of certain flowers or the first sign of autumn to mark important events in their lives, seeing the cycles of nature as signs of divine favor or guidance. As you walk through the garden, you realize that the seasons are not just a way of marking time, they are a reminder of the eternal cycles of life. The garden, with all its beauty and impermanence, is a space where life, death, and rebirth are constantly in motion. It is a living, breathing testament to the wisdom of the earth. The sun is now well into the sky, casting a golden hue across the garden. The light filters through the leaves, painting the paths with dappled shadows. The garden is awake and alive, a vibrant space filled with color, sound, and the rich scent of nature. Yet, even in the full bloom of this new day, there is still a quiet sense of reverence in the air. The Persian gardeners, with their deep connection to the land, saw themselves as guardians of the garden. They weren't just caretakers, they were protectors, stewards of a sacred space. Their role was not only to tend to the plants, but to ensure that the balance of the garden was maintained. They understood that the garden was more than just a collection of plants and trees. It was a living, breathing entity that required careful attention and respect. You pause beside a group of tall, graceful cypress trees. These trees, with their slender trunks and spire-like shapes, are some of the most iconic symbols of Persian gardens. Their height and strength make them seem almost like sentinels, standing watch over the space. They are the guardians of the garden, just as the gardeners are its protectors. A major historical fact. The cypress tree was a symbol of eternity and immortality in ancient Persia. It was often planted in gardens to represent the connection between the mortal world and the divine. The tall, narrow shape of the cypress was seen as a symbol of spiritual ascent, reaching toward the heavens. Historians still debate the specific symbolism of the cypress tree in Persian gardens. Some believe that it was primarily a symbol of eternity, while others suggest that it represented the idea of growth and ascension, both physical and spiritual. Regardless, the cypress was a key element of the Persian garden, standing as a silent guardian of the sacred space. As a quirky tidbit, it is said that Persian gardeners would often plant cypress trees at the entrances of gardens to ward off evil spirits. The tall, straight trunks were thought to act as protective sentinels, guarding the garden from negative energies. Whether or not it worked is uncertain, but the cypress was certainly seen as a symbol of spiritual protection. You look up at the towering trees, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze, and you feel a sense of calm. There is something comforting about their presence, something reassuring about the way they stand so tall and strong, weathering the storms of time. The gardeners, too, were like these trees, rooted in the earth, watching over the space, ensuring that the garden remained a place of beauty, peace, and divine harmony. As you walk deeper into the garden, you begin to notice the subtle rhythms of life that exist within it. The patterns of the plants, the flow of the water, the movement of the wind, All of these elements come together to create a sacred space, a place where every action, every breath has meaning. The garden, it seems, is not just a physical space, it is a ritual. The Persian gardeners saw their work in the garden as a form of ritual. Every task, whether it was planting a new tree, trimming the vines, or tending to the water channels, was done with intention and care. The act of gardening was a spiritual practice, a way of aligning the self with the natural world and the divine. Just as prayers were said in temples, so too were rituals performed in the garden. You pause near a small patch of blooming roses. The delicate petals of the flowers are soft and fragrant, their colors a vibrant mix of pink and white. The gardeners would have spent hours tending to these roses, carefully pruning them to ensure that they bloomed to their fullest potential. In the act of tending to the roses, the gardeners were performing a ritual, one that connected them to the garden, to nature, and to the divine. A major historical fact: Persian gardens were often seen as sacred spaces where the act of tending to the land was considered a form of worship. The gardens were designed to mirror the cosmic order, and the gardeners believed that their work in the garden helped to align their souls with the divine. The rituals performed in the garden were a way of honoring the natural world and seeking spiritual enlightenment. Historians still debate the specific rituals that were performed in Persian gardens. Some suggest that the gardeners engaged in meditation and prayer as they worked, while others argue that the act of gardening itself was the ritual, a quiet, contemplative practice that allowed the gardener to connect with the earth and the divine. Regardless, the idea that gardening was a spiritual practice was central to the Persian belief system. As a quirky tidbit, in some Persian gardens it was common for the gardeners to light incense as they worked, believing that the smoke would carry their prayers to the divine. The incense was not just a fragrance. It was a sacred offering, a way of honoring the garden and the spirits that watched over it. Whether or not the smoke reached the heavens, the act itself was one of deep reverence and devotion. As you stand by the roses, you can almost sense the quiet rituals of the past. The gardeners, with their hands in the soil, would have felt the same sense of peace that you feel now. Their work was not just physical labor. It was an act of devotion, a sacred ritual that connected them to the divine. The sun has begun to set, casting long shadows across the garden. The golden light filters through the trees and the air is warm with the lingering heat of the day. As you walk through the garden, you begin to notice the way the space changes with the light. The shadows stretch across the paths, the flowers glow softly in the dimming light, and the water in the fountains shimmers in the golden hue of the setting sun. The garden, it seems, is alive with the changing light. It is in this moment, as the day shifts into night, that you realize the garden is more than just a place of beauty, it is a reflection of the soul. The Persian gardeners understood this. They knew that the garden, with its ebb and flow of life, was not just a space for plants and trees. It was a space for the soul to reflect, to grow, and to find peace. Just as the garden changed with the light, so too did the gardener's soul change with the rhythms of nature. The garden, with its quiet, calming beauty, was a space for introspection. It was a place where the gardener could come to find peace, to reflect on the larger questions of life, and to connect with something greater than themselves. The garden, in all its complexity, mirrored the complexities of the human soul. Just as the garden required patience and care to grow, so too did the soul require attention and nurturing. As a major historical fact, the Persian belief in the interconnectedness of nature and the soul is reflected in their gardens. These gardens were seen as places where the physical and spiritual worlds merged, where the act of tending to the land was a reflection of the gardener's inner growth. The gardens were designed not just to provide beauty and food, but to create a space where the soul could find peace and alignment with the divine. Historians still debate the exact nature of the Persian belief in the connection between nature and the soul. Some argue that the gardens were seen as a direct reflection of the spiritual journey, while others believe they were simply places of peace and beauty. Regardless, the connection between the garden and the soul was central to the Persian understanding of nature. As a quirky tidbit, it is said that Persian gardeners would often plant their gardens with specific flowers and trees that had symbolic meanings. For example, roses symbolized love and beauty, while cypress trees represented immortality. These symbolic plants were carefully chosen to reflect the gardener's journey and to align their work with the larger cosmic order. The garden, in this sense, became a personal reflection of the gardener's soul. As you walk through the garden, the last light of the day casting a soft glow on the path ahead, you realize that this garden is not just a space of beauty. It is a space of the soul. It reflects the ebb and flow of life, the cycles of nature, and the deep connection between humanity and the divine. As twilight approaches and the night blooms into its deepest hue, you pause near a small grove where the scent of damp earth mixes with the faint aroma of blossoming night jasmine. The stars have started to dot the heavens above, but it is the garden that captivates your attention. The way the night seems to fill every leaf, every petal with a soft, quiet energy. The garden is still, yet not silent. There's a kind of hum that pervades the space, a vibration you might miss if you weren't paying close attention. The Persian gardeners, with their keen sensitivity to the natural world, believed that the garden wasn't just a place where nature existed. It was a place where nature's music played. Its rhythm felt in the pulse of every plant, every movement of wind, every ripple of water. The sounds of the earth, as subtle as they may seem, were like the notes of a song. As every tree, every vine, and every flower was part of this symphony. A composition that, if you listened closely enough, revealed the deeper truths of the universe. As you stand there, letting the sounds of the garden wash over you, you begin to realize that the garden's song is not loud or boisterous. It is soft, almost imperceptible, a background hum that whispers rather than shouts. The rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of water, the soft flap of a bird's wings, all these sounds weave together to create an atmosphere of peace, a harmony that reflects the balance of nature. As a major historical fact, the ancient Persians believed in the concept of, which was the divine order of the universe, the fundamental truth that governed all of existence. The Persian garden, with its careful balance and harmony, was seen as a microcosm of where the natural world existed in perfect alignment with the divine order. To walk through the garden was to walk in tune with this order, to understand the quiet song of the earth. Historians still debate how deeply the ancient Persians understood this concept. Some believe that the garden was meant to be a reflection of the cosmos itself, a physical manifestation of the divine order, while others suggest that the garden was more of a spiritual tool, a way for individuals to connect with the divine through beauty and reflection. Regardless of the specifics, it is clear that the garden was seen as an embodiment of harmony, where every element of nature contributed to a greater whole. As a quirky tidbit, the concept of a garden as a symphony or musical composition was not unique to Persia. In fact, in ancient Greece, gardens were also seen as places where the harmony of the natural world could be reflected in the human soul. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle spoke of gardens as spaces where one could find mental and spiritual clarity, places where the music of nature could be heard if one was still enough to listen. As you close your eyes for a moment, letting the soft sounds of the garden wash over you, you realize that this is what makes the garden sacred. It's not just the plants, the flowers, or the trees. It's the way everything comes together in quiet, harmonious unity, a symphony that speaks in whispers, in the rustle of leaves, in the pulse of the earth. The garden in its stillness offers its own kind of wisdom, a wisdom that comes from the earth itself. As you continue through the garden, the moonlight now bathing everything in a soft silver glow, you find yourself in a space where the air feels different, heavier, richer, and filled with an almost tangible energy. You've come to the center of the garden where the space opens up, revealing the full extent of the landscape. The pathways converge here, the water features shine in the moonlight, and the plants, their leaves glowing softly in the dark, seem to pulse with life. So this is the heart of the garden, the place where everything comes together. The Persian gardeners, in their deep connection to the land, understood that the garden was not just a space to be tended, it was a gift. It was a gift from nature, a gift from the divine, and a gift to be shared. The garden, in its beauty and complexity, was a reminder of the abundance of the earth, of the generosity of nature. The gardeners did not see themselves as owners of the land, they were stewards, caretakers of a gift that had been entrusted to them. In this way, the act of gardening was not just about nurturing the earth. It was about nurturing the soul. You stop near a fountain, the water shimmering in the moonlight, and you reflect on the meaning of this gift. The garden, in all its beauty, is a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. The plants, the trees, the flowers, the water, all of these elements come together in a delicate balance, and it is this balance that makes the garden a sacred space. The gardeners understood that their work was not just about planting and tending. It was about maintaining this balance, ensuring that the gift of the garden would continue to be passed on to future generations. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often seen as places of abundance. They were designed to provide not only beauty but also sustenance. Many gardens included fruit trees, herbs, and vegetables, which were carefully cultivated alongside ornamental plants. This idea of the garden as a place of abundance, where both beauty and sustenance coexist, was central to the Persian view of the natural world. Historians still debate the significance of the Persian garden's design. Some argue that the garden was primarily a reflection of spiritual ideals, while others suggest that the garden was a more practical space designed to meet the needs of the people. Regardless, the idea of the garden as a place of abundance and generosity is deeply rooted in Persian gardening traditions. As a quirky tidbit, some ancient Persian gardens included small spaces set aside for the cultivation of medicinal herbs. These gardens were seen as sacred spaces where gardeners could grow plants that not only nourished the body but also healed the spirit. The act of tending to these plants was believed to bring balance and harmony to both the gardener and the land. As you stand in the heart of the garden, feeling the quiet pulse of life all around you, you realize that this garden is more than just a space. It is a gift. A gift that has been passed down through generations, nurtured by the hands of the gardeners and now shared with you. The garden is a living testament to the generosity of nature and the divine. It is a space where beauty, sustenance, and spiritual connection all come together. The night has now reached its peak and the garden is bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The world around you seems still, but in the garden life continues, quietly, steadily, imperceptibly. The water flows gently in the fountains, the leaves rustle softly in the breeze, and the vines continue to stretch upward, reaching for the stars. The garden, it seems, is timeless. You begin to think about the concept of time in relation to the garden. The Persian gardeners understood that the garden was not just a space where time passed. It was a space where time was marked. The changing of the seasons, the blooming of flowers, the growth of vines, each of these moments was a marker of time, a reminder that life is always in motion, always changing, always growing. But the garden, in its stillness, also offers a sense of permanence. The trees, the vines, the flowers, they have stood here for generations, enduring through the seasons, through the years. They are a testament to the resilience of life, to the way the garden continues to grow and change, even as time moves on. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often designed to reflect the passage of time. The layout of the garden, with its careful arrangement of water features, pathways, and plants, was intended to create a sense of timelessness. The careful placement of plants and trees ensured that the garden would look beautiful in every season, and the changing of the seasons was seen as a way of marking the passage of time. Historians still debate the significance of time in the Persian garden. Some believe that the garden was designed to reflect the cyclical nature of time, with its seasons and cycles of growth and decay. Others argue that the garden was meant to represent an idealized vision of eternal life, where the beauty of the garden transcended the passage of time. As a quirky tidbit, in some Persian gardens, the gardeners would plant trees in such a way that their branches would intertwine, creating natural canopies that provided shade and protection. This was not just a practical design, it was a symbolic one. The intertwining of the branches was meant to represent the interconnectedness of all life, and the way time, like the branches, was always moving and changing, yet still bound together in a delicate harmony. As you walk through the garden, you feel the weight of time and eternity in the stillness of the space. The garden is not just a place of beauty, it is a place of history, a place where time is both marked and transcended. The trees stand as silent witnesses to the passage of time. The vines continue to grow and reach, and the flowers bloom and wither in their eternal dance. The garden is a reminder that, in the end, time itself is a part of the natural order, always changing, always growing, but never truly gone. As the hours pass and the night grows deeper, the garden remains unchanged, yet ever-changing. The air is still warm from the heat of the day, but the coolness of the night gradually settles into your bones, offering the perfect balance of comfort and peace. The sound of distant crickets fills the air, and the rustling of the leaves is soothing in its repetition. You find yourself walking toward the heart of the garden again, to a spot where the earth seems to hold a deeper connection. Here, the soil is rich, dark, and soft beneath your feet, almost like the earth itself is breathing, holding secrets, offering wisdom to those who take the time to listen. The soil is the foundation of the garden, quite literally, and it is here that everything begins. The Persian gardeners knew that the soil was not just a medium for plants to grow in, it was the lifeblood of the garden. Without fertile soil, the plants would wither, the flowers would fade, and the garden would cease to exist. But with soil, with the right care and attention, the garden could thrive. The soil was more than just earth, it was a symbol of life itself, a place where potential could be nurtured, where the future could take root. As you kneel down and run your fingers through the soil, you realize the depth of the connection between the garden and the earth. The soil, rich with nutrients and history, has been the foundation of every plant in this garden. It has been nourished by the seasons, by the gardeners, and by the passing of time. It holds the memory of everything that has come before, every plant that has been nurtured, every seed that has been planted, and every vine that has been carefully tended. Though the earth is the silent keeper of these stories, a testament to the work of countless gardeners who have passed through this space. As a major historical fact, Persian gardeners were known for their mastery in soil management, using advanced techniques to ensure that the soil remained rich and fertile. One such technique was the use of qanats, underground irrigation systems that brought water from distant sources to nourish the soil. This allowed Persian gardens to thrive even in arid regions, demonstrating the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the ancient gardeners. Historians still debate the extent to which ancient Persian gardens relied on these irrigation systems. Some argue that the qanats were the key to the success of the gardens, while others believe that the soil itself, through careful cultivation and composting, played a more vital role. Regardless, the use of water management techniques was a cornerstone of Persian gardening, allowing for the flourishing of plant life in some of the most challenging climates. As a quirky tidbit, the ancient Persians believed that the earth was a living entity and that the soil itself was imbued with divine energy. Some gardeners would perform rituals before planting, offering prayers to the earth and asking for its blessings. They believed that by honoring the soil, they could ensure the fertility of the garden and the success of their crops. As you rise and dust off your hands, you take a moment to reflect on the soil beneath you. It is humble, often unseen, and yet it is the most important element in the garden. Without it, there would be no life, no beauty, no harmony. The soil is the foundation of everything in the garden. It is where the potential for life begins, and it is where it returns to when the garden's cycle ends. The moon has climbed higher in the sky now, casting a silvery light over the garden. The pathways are bathed in this ethereal glow, and the air is thick with the scent of the night's blooms. You walk slowly, allowing the garden to speak to you in its own way, guiding you deeper into its mysteries. The Persian gardeners believed that the garden was not just a physical space, it was a spiritual one. The plants, the trees, the water, and the stones all had symbolic meaning. The garden was a reflection of the divine order of the universe, and each element within it represented a different facet of existence. The carefully planned layout, the arrangement of plants, the movement of water, all were designed to reflect the harmony of the cosmos, the interconnectedness of all things. You stop by a small patch of lavender, its fragrant purple flowers glowing in the moonlight. Lavender was a plant that the ancient Persians held in high regard, both for its beauty and its medicinal properties. But it was also symbolic of purity and clarity, a reminder of the spiritual goals of the garden. To walk through the Persian garden was to walk toward spiritual enlightenment, to align oneself with the rhythms of the earth and the heavens. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often associated with the Zoroastrian concept of, which represented divine order and truth. The garden, with its perfect symmetry and careful planning, was designed to reflect this order. Every element, from the placement of trees to the flow of water, was a conscious choice to mirror the divine balance of the universe. Historians still debate how the symbolism of the garden was incorporated into daily life in ancient Persia. Some believe that the symbolism was a guiding principle in the design of the garden, while others argue that it was more of an afterthought, something added to the space to provide deeper meaning. Regardless, it's clear that the Persian garden was not just a place for physical beauty. It was a space for spiritual reflection, a place where the divine and earthly realms converged. As a quirky tidbit, in ancient Persian gardens, it was not uncommon for gardeners to plant specific trees and flowers based on their symbolic meanings. For example, roses were often used to symbolize love and beauty, while pomegranate trees were associated with fertility and immortality. The garden itself was a living canvas, with each plant representing a different facet of the human experience. You walk deeper into the garden, and as you pass by the roses, the pomegranate trees, and the cypress, you begin to see the larger picture. The garden is more than just a place of beauty. It is a place of meaning, a space where every element has a purpose. Each plant, each tree, each stone is a symbol of life, of growth, of death, and of rebirth. It is a reminder that, in the grand scheme of things, everything is interconnected. As the night wears on, the garden grows even quieter, as if the world itself is slowing down in reverence. The stars above seem brighter now, their light reflecting in the still waters of the fountains, casting an almost otherworldly glow across the garden. The air is crisp, and you can feel the subtle change in the atmosphere. a sense that the garden is about to rest, to breathe in the silence before the day begins again. You pause near a small shrine at the center of the garden, a quiet reminder that this space was not just a place for physical growth but for spiritual reflection. The Persian gardeners understood the importance of the garden's legacy. They knew that what they created would live on not just in the plants and trees but in the spirit of the space itself. The garden was a place of connection, a place where one could find peace, grow spiritually, and align with the divine order of the universe. The gardeners believed that the work they did in the garden was not just for themselves, it was a gift to future generations. They knew that their hands, their care, their knowledge would pass on to those who came after them. The garden was not just an individual endeavor, it was a collective effort, a legacy of beauty, wisdom, and harmony that would live on long after they were gone. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often built as gifts to kings and emperors, as places of peace and reflection. These gardens were designed to leave a lasting legacy, to serve as reminders of the divine order and the beauty of the natural world. Many of the most famous Persian gardens, such as those in Persepolis and Shiraz, were built to honor rulers and to reflect the ideals of the kingdom. Historians still debate the role of Persian gardens in the political and social fabric of ancient Persia. Some argue that the gardens were primarily built for the enjoyment of the elite, while others believe that they were intended as spiritual spaces for all members of society. Regardless, the gardens remain a testament to the legacy of Persian culture, a lasting symbol of the country's reverence for nature and the divine. As a quirky tidbit, many Persian gardens were designed to last for centuries, with trees and plants carefully chosen for their longevity. Some of the trees planted in these gardens still stand today, a reminder of the enduring legacy of the gardeners who created them. The gardens were not just meant to be enjoyed in the present, they were designed to provide beauty and solace for generations to come. As you stand in the quiet of the garden, you realize that it is not just a place of beauty, it is a living legacy. The gardeners who tended this space knew that their work would last long after they were gone, and they created something that would be enjoyed, revered, and passed down through the ages. The garden is not just a physical space, it is a part of the eternal flow of time, a symbol of life, growth, and connection. As the night deepens into an almost tangible silence, the air grows cooler, the first stirrings of dawn still far from the horizon. The garden's life continues to pulse softly beneath the quiet stillness of the night. You find yourself walking through a thicket of trees, their long branches bending slightly under the weight of the leaves. The scent of moist earth, mingled with the fresh fragrance of pine and cypress, fills your lungs. It is here in this part of the garden that you feel something different, something alive within the space. It's not the rustle of leaves or the whisper of the wind, though those sounds are present. No, this sensation feels more profound, as though the garden itself is breathing, expanding and contracting in a slow, eternal rhythm. It's as if the garden has a life of its own, independent of time, and yet deeply tied to the natural world. The Persian gardeners, ever attuned to the subtle shifts in the environment, understood that the garden was alive in more ways than one. They believed that the earth itself had a kind of pulse, a rhythm that connected everything in nature. To tend to the garden was to align oneself with that rhythm, to feel the heartbeat of the earth beneath one's feet. The act of gardening wasn't simply one of care, it was an act of union with nature, of becoming part of its grand and subtle dance. Some major historical fact: Persian gardens were often designed to incorporate both natural and architectural elements that reflected the breadth of the earth. The inclusion of flowing water, the arrangement of trees in symmetric patterns, and the careful use of sunlight and shade were all meant to align the garden with the natural rhythms of the earth. These elements worked together to create a balanced environment that allowed life to thrive, with the garden itself being an expression of the pulse of the planet. Historians still debate whether the Persians viewed their gardens as literal representations of the Earth's life force, or if the connection was more symbolic. Some argue that the gardens were designed as spiritual spaces meant to reflect the divine cycle of nature, while others believe that the natural elements of the garden were viewed as necessary components for the health and prosperity of the people. Either way, the garden was seen as a reflection of the earth's breath, a reminder that all things are interconnected. As a quirky tidbit, the ancient Persian belief in the earth's pulse led to the creation of gardens that were designed with careful attention to the flow of energy. The water channels that ran through the garden weren't just practical. They were believed to channel the life force of the earth, guiding the energy of the garden in a harmonious flow. This connection between water and life energy is a concept that can be seen in many cultures throughout history. As you sit on a stone bench near a quiet pool, the soft sounds of water lapping against the edges, you close your eyes. You can almost feel the earth's breath slow and steady beneath you. It's a sensation that fills you with both calm and awe, and awareness of the quiet power that runs through all of nature. The garden isn't just a collection of plants and trees. It's a living organism, its own heartbeat syncing with that of the planet. As you walk deeper into the garden, you come to a series of tall, stately trees. Their trunks are thick and gnarled, their bark marked by the passage of time. These are the guardians of the garden, trees that have stood here for generations, silently watching over the space. The Persian gardeners saw these trees as symbols of endurance, their strength a reminder that life, though fleeting, can also stand the test of time. You pause in front of one particularly massive tree, a centuries-old oak with a trunk as wide as a small room. Its roots seem to stretch deep into the earth, holding the garden steady. This oak, like the others, has witnessed the passage of countless seasons. Its leaves have turned gold and fallen, only to return each year. The garden has changed around it, but the oak remains, a silent witness to the ebb and flow of life. The gardeners of ancient Persia understood that their gardens were more than just a place for plants to grow. They were symbols of life's endurance and resilience. The trees, particularly the older ones, were regarded with great respect. They were not merely plants to be cared for, they were living records, keepers of the garden's history. As a major historical fact, the Persians often planted trees that were symbolic of both life and death. Cypress trees, for example, were believed to represent immortality, while willows were associated with mourning and loss. These trees served as markers in the garden, representing the cycles of life: birth, growth, death, and rebirth. The ancient gardeners believed that by tending to these trees, they were honoring not just the natural world but also the eternal flow of time. Historians still debate the exact symbolism of the trees in Persian gardens. Some argue that the trees were meant to represent the stages of the human soul, from birth to death and beyond, while others suggest that the trees were simply meant to represent the passage of time in the natural world. Regardless of the specifics, the trees were central to the spiritual significance of the garden. They were symbols of endurance, life, and the eternal cycle of existence. As a quirky tidbit, Persian gardens often included trees that were thought to possess healing properties. For example, the pomegranate tree, associated with fertility and immortality, was also believed to have medicinal qualities. Its fruit was used in ancient Persian medicine to treat various ailments, and its leaves were thought to possess purifying properties. The trees in the garden, therefore, were not only symbolic, they were practical, offering both spiritual and physical sustenance. As you stand before the oak, you can't help but feel a deep sense of reverence for it. Its presence is undeniable. Its strength, its endurance, and its quiet wisdom are all written in the texture of its bark, in the twisting branches that reach skyward. The tree is a living testament to the passage of time, a reminder that the garden is not just a space for plants but a place where time itself is marked. As the night has stretched on and the garden, bathed in moonlight, feels like a dream. The air is cool, the paths shrouded in a soft mist, and the sounds of the garden are muted, as if the space itself is holding its breath. You wander toward the reflecting pool in the center of the garden, where the water lies still, mirroring the stars above and the trees surrounding it. The pool is perfectly clear, its surface like glass. You look down and see your reflection staring back at you. But the reflection isn't just of you, it's of everything around you. The trees, the flowers, the moon, and the stars, they are all captured in the water's surface, creating a perfect mirror. You realize that, in this moment, you are part of the garden, just as much a reflection of it as it is of you. In Persian gardens, the use of water as a reflective surface was not just a design choice, it was symbolic. The water was seen as a mirror to the soul, a way of reflecting both the external and the internal. The garden itself, in its perfect balance, reflected the divine order of the universe. And in this reflection, the gardener could see not just the beauty of the world around them but their own place within it. As a major historical fact, the use of water as a reflective element in Persian gardens was closely tied to the Zoroastrian belief in duality, the balance between light and dark, good and evil, order and chaos. The reflective pools in the garden were seen as a way to align oneself with this balance, to reflect on one's own actions and thoughts, and to find harmony within oneself and with the world. Historians still debate the spiritual significance of the reflective pools in Persian gardens. Some suggest that the pools were intended to represent the connection between the human soul and the divine, while others argue that the water simply provided a peaceful, tranquil environment for contemplation. Regardless, the symbolism of the mirror, reflecting both the garden and the self, is an integral part of the garden's spiritual meaning. As a quirky tidbit, It is said that ancient Persian gardeners would often pause before the reflecting pools and engage in a form of silent meditation, allowing the water to reflect not only their image but their inner thoughts as well. The water, in this sense, was not just a passive element. It was an active participant in the process of self-reflection, offering insight and clarity to those who took the time to look. As you gaze into the pool, you see the reflection of the trees, the moon, and yourself all perfectly mirrored in the water. For a moment, it feels as though time has slowed, as though you are suspended between two worlds, the world of the garden and the world within you. The garden is not just a place of beauty. It is a reflection of the soul, a space where the external and internal worlds meet, where the divine and the earthly are one. As the garden breathes in the cool embrace of the early morning, you continue your walk along the softly winding paths. The first light of dawn spills across the landscape, casting long shadows from the cypress trees, and the air smells of dewy earth and fresh blossoms. The calm of the morning holds the promise of new life, yet there's something familiar and timeless about the quiet rhythms of the garden. It's as if the garden itself is waiting for something, as if each plant, each tree, and each stone is silently anticipating the change that each season brings. The Persian gardeners understood that just as nature moves in cycles, so too do the rhythms of the human heart. They knew that the changing of the seasons wasn't just a reflection of the world outside, but of the inner world as well. The heart, much like the garden, goes through its own seasons, periods of growth, periods of stillness, and periods of letting go. The gardeners saw the garden as a mirror of the soul, each season bringing with it an opportunity for introspection, growth, and renewal. You stop beside a patch of newly bloomed tulips, their vibrant colors bright in the morning light. The tulips seem to stand out in the quiet landscape, a symbol of the spring that has arrived. The gardeners of ancient Persia would have appreciated the tulip's fleeting beauty, knowing that, like the seasons of the heart, they too would bloom and fade. There was no rushing nature here, only a quiet acceptance of the cycles of life. As a major historical fact, tulips, once believed to be native to Persia, became an emblem of beauty and abundance. Their cultivation in Persian gardens was not just for ornamental purposes, but also symbolized the arrival of spring, a time of renewal and rebirth. Their vibrant colors and short life cycle made them a perfect metaphor for the Persian understanding of life's fleeting nature. As historians still debate the origins of the tulip in Persia. Some believe the flower was introduced during the 16th century, while others argue that it was cultivated in Persia long before it became famous in Europe. Regardless of its origins, the tulip has remained a symbol of the beauty and fragility of life, an idea that resonated deeply with the gardeners of ancient Persia. As a quirky tidbit, the tulip was once considered so valuable in Persia that it became a symbol of wealth and status. In fact, during the early 1600s, the Dutch began importing tulip bulbs from Persia, starting the infamous tulip mania, where the price of tulips skyrocketed to astronomical levels. The Persians, it seems, knew the true worth of this delicate flower long before the rest of the world caught on. As you watch the tulips gently sway in the morning breeze, you begin to see how the changing of seasons in the garden is not just a physical process. It is also an emotional one. The garden, with its bursts of new growth and the inevitable fading of blooms, mirrors the heart's own seasons, periods of flowering joy and of quiet reflection. The gardeners, who understood this deeply, cultivated the garden not just for its physical beauty, but for the nourishment of the soul. The sun rises higher, and the warmth of the day begins to settle in. As you continue your journey, you find yourself drawn to a small, secluded corner of the garden where the air is cool and the light is soft. The trees here are more spaced out, allowing you to see the sky above, a vast expanse that stretches endlessly just as your thoughts begin to stretch into the quiet space around you. This is a place of tranquil reflection, a space where the mind can wander freely, unfettered by the busyness of the world. You sit on a simple stone bench surrounded by the deep green of ivy and the soft chirping of distant birds. There is a sense of serenity here, a deep peace that settles into your bones. You feel in this moment like you are a part of the garden, just as the plants, the trees, the flowers, and the vines are all part of it. The Persian gardeners understood the importance of creating spaces for reflection. These gardens were not just designed for aesthetic pleasure. They were meant to be places of spiritual renewal, a way of reconnecting with the self and the world. The act of sitting quietly in the garden, watching the flow of water or the movement of the wind through the trees, was as much a part of the spiritual practice as the physical act of gardening. It was a space where one could pause, breathe, and consider the deeper meaning of life. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were often designed with dedicated spaces for quiet reflection and contemplation. These spaces were placed strategically within the gardens, creating an environment conducive to meditation and spiritual clarity. The placement of trees, water features, and pathways was done with care, allowing for moments of solitude and reflection throughout the garden. Historians have noted that the Persian garden was often considered a space of spiritual importance, not just for the elite but for people of all classes. It was believed that by spending time in these gardens, individuals could achieve a deeper understanding of themselves and their place in the universe. This belief in the garden's spiritual power was linked to the Zoroastrian idea that the natural world could be a reflection of the divine order. As a quirky tidbit, some of the most famous Persian gardens, such as the ones in Shiraz, were constructed near ancient places of worship. These gardens were intended to provide a peaceful space for reflection after a spiritual or religious service, allowing individuals to connect with the divine in a setting that mirrored the celestial order. As you sit quietly, taking in the peaceful atmosphere of the garden, you begin to feel the layers of stress and distraction fall away. The beauty of the surroundings, the soft rustling of the leaves, and the stillness of the moment allow your mind to clear. You understand, perhaps more deeply than ever, why these gardens were created, not just for beauty, but to allow those who entered them to find clarity, peace, and alignment with the divine. As the day continues to unfold, the garden around you grows brighter, the colors more vivid in the afternoon sunlight. The air, now warmed by the sun, holds a sense of life, vibrant, pulsing with energy. You can see how the vines reach ever upward, their tendrils curling and twisting, seeking the sun with an inherent grace. The flowers seem to open fully now, their petals wide, as if in full bloom, just as the garden itself reaches out to the light. It is in these moments that you realize how the garden itself embodies the divine order. It's not just the plants, the trees, or the water features. It's the way everything is interconnected, balanced, and aligned. The flow of water from the fountains, the placement of trees, the colors of the flowers, all come together in perfect harmony, reflecting the divine rhythm of the universe. The Persian gardeners, steeped in their belief in the divine order, saw the garden as a physical manifestation of this spiritual truth. They believed that the garden was not just a space for physical growth. It was a reflection of the divine harmony that governed the universe. The careful design of the garden mirrored the cosmos, the elements of earth, water, air, and fire coming together in perfect balance. The act of tending the garden was, therefore, an act of aligning oneself with the divine order of the universe, bringing peace and harmony not only to the garden, but also to the gardener's soul. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were based on the concept of the four-part garden, which symbolized the four elements of nature: earth, water, air, and fire. These elements were seen as the foundation of life, and the Persian garden was designed to reflect this divine order. The use of water, particularly, was symbolic of the divine presence, as it was believed to connect the earthly and the heavenly realms. Historians continue to study the significance of in Persian gardens, noting that the garden was designed to reflect not just the elements of nature, but also the relationship between humanity and the divine. The space itself was seen as a portal, a place where one could connect with the divine order and experience a sense of peace and harmony. As a quirky tidbit, some Persian gardeners would plant a special type of tree or flower in the center of the garden, symbolizing the divine. The most famous of these was the tree of life, a central element that represented the axis of the universe, connecting the heavens and the earth. The gardens were thus designed as symbolic representations of the universe, a place where the spiritual and physical realms could meet. As you stand there in the sunlight, the garden's beauty seems to transcend the physical. The alignment of the elements, the balance of nature, and the connection between earth and heaven make it clear that the garden is more than just a space for beauty. It is a manifestation of divine order, a place where the soul can find peace and connection. The garden is still, but its stillness is never empty. It is full, filled with the life of countless creatures, of growing things, of memories and moments held within its soil. You walk along a narrow, winding path lined with flowering shrubs that open their blossoms toward the sun. The shadows have lengthened as the sun descends, but the air remains warm, filled with the perfume of jasmine and roses. The Persian gardeners, deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature, knew that life was not simply a series of events or moments. It was an ongoing flow, a current that never stopped moving. They saw the garden as a reflection of this flow, the constant cycle of birth, growth, death, and renewal that marked the natural world. The water that trickled through the channels of the garden, the blooming flowers, and the falling leaves all reflected this ongoing cycle. A cycle that was always in motion, yet always returning. As in the Persian garden, there was a deep understanding that everything was part of an eternal flow. The gardeners themselves were a part of this flow. By planting, tending, and harvesting, they aligned themselves with the natural world. They knew that their actions in the garden would not last forever, that just as the plants would eventually fade and return to the earth, so would they. But this did not cause fear. The gardeners did not resist this flow, they embraced it. They worked with it, understanding that the cycle of life and death was not something to fear, but something to honor. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were designed to embody the eternal cycle of life. This cycle, reflected in the gardens, was aligned with Zoroastrian beliefs about the cosmic order of the universe. Everything in the garden, the plants, trees, water, and stones, was seen as participating in this divine cycle, where birth, death, and rebirth were part of a harmonious rhythm. Historians have noted that the design of the Persian garden was deeply rooted in Zoroastrian philosophy, which emphasized dualities, light and dark, good and evil, life and death. The gardens, with their use of water, trees, and symmetrical layouts, reflected this idea of cosmic balance. Some believe the gardens were designed to mirror the eternal flow of life, while others suggest that they were created as spaces where individuals could connect with the cycles of nature in a meditative, spiritual way. As a quirky tidbit, the ancient Persians believed that the changing seasons in the garden mirrored the internal seasons of a person's life. In the spring, life was reborn, in the summer it flourished, in the autumn it matured, and in the winter it prepared for renewal. Some gardeners even wrote poems dedicated to these seasonal shifts, seeing them as reflections of the soul's journey through time. As you walk through the garden, you notice the subtle changes that the seasons have brought. The roses, once in full bloom, are now slowly starting to fade, their petals soft and delicate. The leaves of the cypress trees rustle in the evening breeze, turning from green to a golden hue. The garden, in its way, is marking the passage of time, and you realize that just as the seasons change, so too do you. Every thought, every step, every breath part of a constant ebb and flow. Night has fully descended now, and the garden takes on a new life beneath the starry sky. The air is cooler, and the light from the distant stars bathes the landscape in a faint silver glow. The trees, their branches swaying softly, stand like silent sentinels, watching over the garden as it settles into its own quiet rhythm. The sound of the wind is no longer just wind, it carries with it the whispers of the past, the voices of those who have walked this path before you. The Persian gardeners believed that the garden was not simply a space where life unfolded. They believed it was a living memory. Each plant, each tree, each stone carried the imprint of the past. The vines that grew along the walls were not just vines. They were the result of years of cultivation, years of care, and the gardeners saw them as vessels of history. Just as the trees grew tall and the flowers bloomed, the memory of every gardener who tended the land lived on within them. You pause near a patch of ivy, its leaves curling and twisting in delicate patterns. The gardeners of Persia would have told you that this ivy, like all the plants in the garden, carried the memory of those who came before. It wasn't just a plant, it was a record, a living testament to the care and effort of generations of gardeners. The ivy had witnessed the changing of seasons, the passing of years, and through it all it had thrived. The memory of the garden was held in the soil, in the roots, in the very air. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were not just spaces for physical beauty, they were living records of cultural and familial history. Many gardens were passed down through generations, with each new gardener adding their own touch to the space. The trees, plants, and pathways in the garden were not just plants. They were the living history of the families and communities who tended to them. Historians still debate the role of memory in the Persian garden. Some argue that the garden was seen as a living, breathing record of the land, where each plant and tree carried the collective memory of those who came before. Others suggest that the garden was more of a symbolic space, a reflection of the ideals and values of the Persian people, rather than a literal memory of their past. But what is certain is that the garden, in its beauty and complexity, carries the echoes of the past with it. As a quirky tidbit, some Persian gardeners would mark the growth of a tree or plant by engraving its trunk with the year it was planted. These markings were not just for record keeping. They were a way of honoring the passage of time and acknowledging the role of the gardener in the ongoing cycle of life. Some of these trees, which still stand today, carry the names of their original gardeners, who left their mark on the land in a way that transcends time. As you stand by the ivy, feeling the cool night air, you realize that the garden is not just a place of beauty. It is a living, breathing memory. It holds the stories of those who have come before you, their care and love for the land woven into the very fabric of the space. The garden is not just a physical space. It is a part of the ongoing story of life, one that continues to unfold with each new season. As the night grows deeper, the garden begins to settle into a quiet rhythm, its movements becoming more subtle, more introspective. The stars overhead shine brightly, their ancient light casting a soft glow on the path ahead. The air is cool, and the stillness of the garden invites you to pause and reflect once again. You find yourself walking toward the edge of the garden, where the path narrows and disappears into the shadows. It's here at the garden's edge that you feel the boundary between the known and the unknown, between the past and the future. The garden has been your companion, guiding you through its spaces, revealing its beauty and wisdom. But now, as the garden comes to its quiet end, you realize that the journey you've taken through it is just one part of a much larger journey. The Persian gardeners understood this. They knew that the garden, like life itself, was a cycle, one that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the end was not something to be feared. It was simply another phase in the cycle, just as the fading of the flowers in the fall would give way to new growth in the spring. The garden's quiet ending was not an end at all. It was a transition, a part of the ongoing rhythm of life. As a major historical fact, Persian gardens were designed to reflect the cycles of life and death. The careful arrangement of plants and water features was meant to symbolize the passage of time, with each plant having its season to bloom and wither. This cyclical view of life and death was deeply rooted in Persian culture and was reflected in the way the gardens were created and maintained. Historians still debate the significance of the end of the garden in Persian culture. Some argue that the garden's seasonal cycles were a reflection of the Persian belief in the cyclical nature of the universe, while others suggest that the garden's beauty was meant to offer a glimpse of eternal life. Regardless of the interpretation, the garden's ending was not seen as an absolute end. It was simply a transition, a return to the earth from which it came. A quirky tidbit: some ancient Persian gardens were designed with specific endings in mind. These endings, often marked by a small, quiet space or a stone bench, were intended to be places for reflection on the transient nature of life. The gardener could sit, breathe, and contemplate the garden's passage, understanding that just as the seasons changed, so too did the cycles of life. As you reach the edge of the garden, you stop for a moment and look back at the space you've just walked through. The garden, with its quiet beauty, its harmony, and its connection to the natural world, has been a reminder that life in all its forms is an ongoing cycle, one that continues to unfold one moment at a time.